In Simulink, we're going to program our Mini-Q robot, and what we're going to program it to do is take input from a push button on it, 1, 2, or 3. We're not going to try and specify which button's pressed, but what we want it to do is turn on an RGB LED. Now, if we look at this Simulink model, you'll see that I have a switch block, which is receiving input from the button key, and I'm going to click into the switch block. You're going to see that the threshold value is set at 0. Now, in the Mini-Q block library for Simulink, each of the push buttons outputs its value. So if I push button 1, what you would get as an input is button 1 or 1. If I push button 2, then what I would get is the output 2. So an output in button 3, output of 3. So all these values are bigger than the threshold value, once again of 0. And the switch going into the RGB LED is between 0 and 200. And if 255 is the maximum amount we can set as a constant for the RGB LED to receive, it's going to fluctuate between all of the values received in the RGB LED, either being all zeros or as 1/200 being filtered into the RGB LED block at the R position. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this model on my Mini-Q robot. So I'm going to press the run symbol up here, the play symbol. Alright, here we go. So here I am with my model deployed to hardware, and so you can see the simulation is running down at the bottom. I've been running it for about 50 seconds now. So I'm going to go ahead and press one of the buttons. The RGB LED is already on, so if I press a button now, any of them, you'll see that it turns off. And the reason for that is because we have the constants in reverse order. What we really wanted is the RGB LED to be off until we press the button. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change this constant value by double clicking into the top constant block to 200, press enter, and then I'm going to change the bottom constant block to 0 and then press enter. What has happened now is the Mini-Q robot's light is off, and if I press the button, any button, you'll see that the light turns on. Here I have a slightly different model than what we just looked at. I have a push button block, MATLAB function, and RGB LED all connected to each other by arrows. I'm going to double click into the MATLAB function to see how it's constructed, and I have outputs for my function in line 1 stated as red, green, and blue. I have an input labeled as button, and let's look at what's within that function now. If button 1 is pressed, and keep in mind that each button outputs its value, the output red will be at a value set at 200 while green and blue are 0. Else if button 2 is pressed, what's going to happen is blue outputs a value of 200 while the rest are 0. Else if button 3 is pressed, we have green being an output value of 255. And then else, every other situation but being those 3 buttons being pressed, red, green, and blue are all set to 0. It's important to make sure that you close out your functions with these end lines. You'll see that they have to match up, one with the function in line 1 and the other one with the initial if statement at the beginning of us describing what our function does. So depending on which button is pressed, the MATLAB function interprets that and sends out a variety of values to the red, green, and blue connectors of the RGB LED block. So let's go ahead and let's run this model by pressing the run button shaped as a play symbol. I'm going to click it. So here I am with my code executed and running on my Mini-Q robot. You'll notice that as I press each button, the Mini-Q robot's LED changes color. Button 1 red, button 2 blue, and then button 3 green. So this is exactly what I would expect according to our MATLAB function. I'm going to double click into it again, and you'll see that if button 1 is pressed in line 2, what happens is the value for red is 200 while green and blue are 0. Else if button 2 is pressed, blue becomes the highest value at 200. Else if button 3 is pressed, what happens is green becomes the highest value at 255. Else, for the condition where none of the buttons are pressed, red, green, and blue are all set to 0. It's very important to remember when we create these functions in MATLAB to close them out with end, these statements here, line 18 and 19, otherwise you're going to get an error.